Hello and welcome to the Conskipper podcast. I'm Skipper John,
And I'm Skipper Nick.
and we're here with a fresh review of the brand new film, The Conjuring. The Devil Made Me Do It. Well, Nick, we will both watch the film.
Yep.
It's available in theaters and on HBO Max. And we're going to talk a little bit about what we thought of the film.
Looking forward to it.
So, we've seen all of these movies, and I think there was one of them that we really liked,
That's correct.
the first one. And then many of them that
Missed the mark, so to speak, for some reason or another.
it's a nice way to put it. And then some that we found to be tolerable.
Yes.
And so I think it's important to note that this, even though we're probably the prime target audience for this kind of picture, being big fans of horror films, fans of ghost stories, and fans of Ed and Lorraine Warren. So I think I don't want to speak for you too much, but I think both of us appreciate probably the best moments of this franchise are moments which focus on Ed and Lorraine.
I totally agree. And I think we are that target demographic for a number of reasons. And being longtime fans of the Warrens, having grown up in Connecticut, their home state, which is referenced throughout almost all of the Conjuring films and spin-offs, seeing them do their speeches back in the day at local high schools, at Holiday Inns. I'm all over the place when they would go on their speaking tours. That we are sort of, we have it ingrained that these are films that should appeal to us.
And probably in terms of this new one, The Devil Made Me Do It, I would say, my favorite parts from this movie were that now that Patrick Wilson and Vera Farmiga have done these roles for quite some time,
Yeah.
And as they've always been excellent performers, but they seem to have, by this film, there were times where I looked at them and I was like, oh my God, it's almost like talking to Ed and Lorraine. It reminded me of those lectures and the just the mannerisms and the especially for Vera Farmiga,
I would agree. Yeah.
she looks just like Lorraine Warren. It's uncanny the way that she is able to kind of channel that her spirit and her personality, which I found to be very touching. Having
Right.
Just in the encounters that I had was
Sure.
grateful to have with Lorraine, and they did spend some time with her. I know before the first film. And I think it paid off because, that's the best, for me, that's the best part of this movie. The rest of it, I could take it or leave it.
Yeah, I would agree with you that over the course of the three films, plus some work in the Annabelle Comes Home film from a couple of years ago, they, as you said, especially with Lorraine, the performance by Vera is very, very similar to channeling, no pun intended, Lorraine. And even Patrick Wilson, who doesn't necessarily bear a physical resemblance to Ed Warren, but his mannerisms,
Right.
kind of the way that he speaks, the short kind of curt answers, the sense of humor was very much Ed Warren.
Absolutely. So, one thing about, I think, that made the first Conjuring film so excellent, of course, is, the direction by James Wan. I mean,
Right.
he, this guy is responsible for some of the biggest franchises in horror, and now he's even moved out of horror.
Right. To action, superheroes.
Right. And this movie, it tries to capture some of the James Wan storytelling devices and some of the scares. And I think
Yeah.
this movie did better with the storytelling devices than it did with establishing original or unique, frightful scenes.
Right.
And so, there were things, in terms of capturing the James Wan formula, I found the scares of this movie to not be very creative. One of my biggest problems with horror films are when they do the whole, okay, it's really quiet, and the audience knows a big loud noise is going to happen.
Right.
And then, there's the misdirection, like, oh, it's only a dang rat, which they did 2 times in this movie.
You're right, they did.
Just a rat. And then, whoa, here's the loud sound.
Right.
This movie, for me, took it to another level because, I don't know if you felt this way, the sound mix was so low for the dialogue that, it made those jump scares even louder, which made it, frankly, for an unpleasant experience watching it, because I felt like sometimes I had trouble hearing the dialogue.
Yes, I found the same. I found the same problem. In fact, beyond and on the opposite end of it, I found myself turning up, and I watched it on HBO Max. I had to turn up the volume much higher than I normally would, because, like you said, of that mix. And then when the crash would happen, well, the whole house is shaking.
Your house would rattle.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So that, I felt like, especially in the first Conjuring film, when Juan was able to create these scares that, had almost the sound, didn't matter. It was a lot of it just played in the performances of actors who were scared, who were performing that they were frightened. And this one kind of took, I think, the easier road.
Much easier.
And I also think that, I understand these types of horror films have to please maybe people who aren't our target audience either.
Right.
Teenagers who are going to go to the theater, and if it doesn't have that kind of stuff, might walk out and say, oh, well, it wasn't scary.
Right.
And, I think I'm afraid that this film might not appeal to either group.
Yeah.
And the reason I think this is that this film I felt was more grounded in many places, except when we get to like zombies, and Lorraine saying that she spoke to the ghost of Elvis.
Right.
But you had no nun, no crooked man, which I thought were just outrageous in that second
type
film.
Of characters. Right.
But let's face it. I mean, that doesn't matter what I think. They made a nun movie that ended up making a ton of cash.
Maybe their most financially successful film worldwide.
Yeah, and I'm kind of surprised. I don't know if this was their way of wrapping up the franchise, but this movie didn't. For a series that's famous for its spin-offs. I mean, there are more Conjuring spin-off films than there are Conjuring movies.
Right, there are, for sure.
And I'm surprised that they didn't, whip up some kind of new creature like that for, there's not going to be a naked zombie man movie.
No, that's a one-trick pony. I thought so too, and I was surprised they also went away from the format that they developed, that Juan developed in the first film, with starting the new film with a little vignette like they did with Annabelle, the introduction of Annabelle. In the second one, It was about Amityville, right? And when I was watching it, I thought, is this... I was fooled, I guess, thinking that, so this is a different case. This is not the one that it's going to be focused on.
But it was. And, so I thought that was interesting because... And I'm sure you've read the book, right? The Devil in Connecticut.
Yes.
And the case files for this case. Now we're both probably used to these movies going way off the script in terms of like what's documented,
of course,
to have happened. And this film did too. Once we get to the tunnels and some, satanic
cult activity,
right? And for one of the things is that story is largely focused on the boy. And it was, the case of the possessed boy was, barely in the film.
Yeah. And,
I remember a lot of the details from that book focused on what the kid saw, what happened to the kid. And it was kind of told throughout the story outside of chronological order.
Yep.
I think that telling this story outside of chronological order was probably the only way that you could tell this story on film, but it still didn't work. I almost kept waiting, like, when are we going to see the trial? You know?
Yes.
So the story really ended up not being either person's story.
Viewpoint. Yeah.
Viewpoint, yeah.
I also found that I was a bit confused with those choices because I thought a good segment of the film, and in fact, I'm pretty sure that it was sold this way in terms of the promotional materials for it, was that there would be a lot of procedural
About the
courtroom,
trial.
right? Courtroom drama, something different we haven't seen in one of these films before.
I was hoping for like a My Cousin Vinny, but with ghosts.
With paranormal investigators and the devil,
Right.
Yeah.
I wanted to see them testify, and now I know that I mean in real life the judge didn't accept that
Right.
as
A
you know,
valid, yeah.
that
valid
they could proceed with that argument, and the jury was told that they couldn't consider
Right.
that perhaps a man who murdered someone was possessed by a demon. But I mean, this is again a franchise known for dramatizing these things and not being 100% factually accurate. I think that if they had spent more time on that, on the procedural stuff in the courtroom and everything, it might have made for a more gripping story.
Yeah, I think so. I think also, I mean, probably of any genre, the whole based on a true story, like that kind of a thing, always attracts horror fans to a film
Right.
or a television series. And you have to, and like you said, it's not going to be a straight adaptation of one of these, one of the books or one of the cases. But I think if you have elements that do seem, even if they're not, real, I think it grounds it, and therefore it makes it perhaps a little scarier too for the audience.
And the parts where it strayed ended up for me being some of the weakest parts of the film.
Yeah.
Like the part where they got the flower delivery to their house, and they're like, "Oh my God, we got to check these flowers," and then
Right.
the vase smashes, and there's a full satanic totem inside the vase,
Right.
and that Ed was just looking into it, had this little tiny mouth on it, and I'm happy to suspend my disbelief, but at that point, I was thinking, like, how did they get that thing in the bottle? Was it like a boat in a bottle? Like they had to piece it
They
together,
had to cut it.
like one little piece at a time?
Right.
Did they build the totem and then like make the vase around it?
That's gonna be unknown.
There's
The
just no
answer
way
to
to
that.
get that thing in through that small mouth. That
There is
vase.
no way. No.
But I mean, I know there's other things, like the nude zombie.
That bothered me a lot. Not that I have any issues with nude zombies in any film. Obviously, that's part and parcel of it. But in this film, it just did not fit for me.
Yeah, I had trouble. I especially in that the first time we see it. I almost was wondering if it was like the second time, because in the second time, like it wasn't really physically there.
That makes sense the second time.
Right, and the first time, the whole time I was like, this can't be real, right?
Right.
This isn't real.
I think that with the sort of the hallmark of the series, and a lot of these series, is that Lorraine is able to see these visions,
Right.
and therefore you can really get wild with what's happening. But then it's brought back to reality. She's seeing it in her mind. She's communing with spirits. But yeah, when that guy gets off the table and begins walking, I thought, hold on a second. How is Ed seeing this creature get off the slab?
Then he starts charging like a bull.
Yeah, like a runaway train, and then crashes down in the morgue or whatever.
And for me, like the misstep with that is we've seen this done before, and we've seen it done more effectively.
Yes, we
like
have.
I'm thinking right now of like in It Follows.
Oh, yeah,
when they
sure.
did that.
Yeah.
It just was off brand
It was.
for not just the Warrens case files, but even what this film series has been doing.
Right.
It almost would have been more effective in that case if they drew up some new James Wan like, demon or
Character, sure.
creature or something, just to. I mean, I almost would believe that a little bit more.
Yeah, I would too. I think it's about ghosts. It's about demons and devils. It's about things which cannot that don't exist in the physical world.
Yeah. And it was also out of character, I think, for to have Ed and Lorraine like breaking into a morgue and like digging
Yeah.
digging through the basement and
Ed didn't stop for 1 second,
no.
smashing that.
He went right for it.
I know he was a rascal at times, but that seemed even beyond what I would expect from Mr. Warren.
Right. And there are moments where they could have built on character, but like there was almost a throwaway line. Remember when they go to the priest or the ex-priest's house and he's like, "Come here, let's go down to my basement." And Lorraine was like, "I don't want to go down there."
Yeah.
Right? And
Yes.
she's up at the top of the steps like, "I don't want to go down there." And then like the next scene, she's just
there.
down there.
Yeah.
Like no convincing, no like
No
coming around to
hesitation.
like, oh, but I guess I need to. Like all of a sudden it's just like, okay, here she is.
Yeah.
So, they had time to kind of build, and they did. In some spots, they did build on their relationship. Like, we really get who they are by the end of this. And it is an accurate representation of them as people.
I agree.
But, the rest of it was just like, either unnecessary or it just seemed weird.
It did. I really, once I realized, to go back to the beginning, once I realized that vignette was part of the story, and it is a wild exorcism scene. I mean, just as we said, when you want to suspend your disbelief, the things that are happening are
Yes.
so outrageous, and like really it looked like it could have been a scene from WandaVision with Wanda fighting Agatha Harkness.
Right.
I thought, oh, are we going? And it's the fact that usually we amp up to those scenes, like in the
Right.
first Conjuring. But when you get right out of the gate with this, with a maelstrom in this little house in Brookfield, and scratching on the walls. In fact, I thought the beginning when I saw that scratch was like, oh, they're gonna do the werewolf case. This is the intro to the werewolf case.
Oh, okay.
Now, I don't think I would have wanted to see that either, because that goes a little farther, although it was obviously
you
a
don't
case.
want to see that unless John Steinbeck wrote it.
Only if John Steinbeck wrote it, and we need that, folks listening at home. We really do need that John Steinbeck
Yes, please.
novel.
Release the werewolf book.
Check out the website. We have an article about it this week. We really need this. This needs to be realized in the world. But in this case, I didn't want to see a werewolf. And then when I realized it wasn't even the werewolf,
Yeah.
and it was
It
the
was just
little
a boy. Yeah.
It was just a young boy scratching. It looked like a velociraptor was making those claw marks.
Yeah. And in terms of the way that it was executed, it was weird to me that they did it and then they're like, okay, everything's good and back to normal. And then you go in the house like later on and there's still all these like scratches. Like
They didn't fix it.
nobody tried to touch it up or
Nope.
anything. They're just like, yeah, and I don't know if that was the film's way of telling us like, oh, this is the same location
Right.
or what it was, because it's my understanding, at least in the case files, like that murder happens months after the boy is
Yes.
exorcised.
Right.
And so I don't know if they plan to get around to patching up those scratches later, but I mean, if it was me, I would have the paint bucket out the next day. Like,
Some plaster.
yeah.
Yeah, I don't think you'd want to be reminded of that, especially since those claw marks look like they would take the whole house down.
Right.
So it for me, it just, with that opening, with the other scene which comes, maybe like you said, there wasn't any months between when the boy goes to Arnie, being possessed. That's very quick, and then that scene is also a wild one
Oh, yes.
with very loud music being played, and and then it just it devolves, and you get where where you're going, but
when this film got wild too, again, I mean, I know we just keep going back to James Wan as brilliant at this
Right.
stuff, but I always had a great sense of space in James Wan horror films, whether it be Insidious or The Conjuring or even the first Saw movie, which
Yes.
is in one room.
Yeah.
He was always he's very good at kind of letting the viewer know where you are in space and time.
Right.
And these, when they happened, it almost, those possession exorcism scenes reminded me of like a music video.
Yeah.
Like it was like very quick cuts, and I didn't have that same not like knowledge of space and time in those scenes.
That you're exactly right about that. And in fact, it was made even more apparent to me because when I watched it on Friday, and I watched it with my wife, and she hadn't seen the second film, and she thought this was the sequel. And I said, no, there's a second movie. And she's like, oh, well, let's watch that. And I actually watched the second film.
Oh boy,
back-to-back showings.
Ooh, that was a double feature.
That
I'll
was
never forget.
That was a double dose. And I noticed those differences between Juan's choices in terms of, because that movie has a lot of flaws too. The second one about the Enfield case,
Yeah.
but the space, always knew you were in their apartment. You knew where they were in that water flooded basement. Like you could conceptualize everything. I think this one, well, obviously because it's a different director and Michael Chavez, and he didn't pay attention to those things. And he's a young director. He doesn't have the body of work that James Wan has. But seeing it back to back, it was very apparent.
What did you think of at the end of the film with Ed Warren as Jack Torrance?
Yeah, he was all of a sudden spry with that sledgehammer.
Yeah,
he did turn into Jack.
Started busting down doors, and
again, he busted so much, interior work in that house. I thought the whole barn was coming down.
Yeah.
He looked like a real old John Henry smashing up everything.
Yeah, I just don't know that we needed that climax.
No. Well, the answer is no, we didn't. I mean, we didn't need that climax. And to give the film a little, well, I don't know if it's credit, but the one thing I thought was interesting, which again didn't satisfy me at the end, was that in the first and second films, and even any of the spin-offs, there really hasn't been a human antagonist. Right? Never. And I think that was an interesting kind of the anti-Lorraine, right? I mean, really, like even in the type of dress, that she was wearing. And I thought that was an interesting thing to explore because having seen them speak about different cases, and I saw a lot of this stuff at the tail end of the Satanic Panic in terms of in the United States when everyone thought there was a cultist behind every tree and in every schoolyard.
Right.
And so they would talk sometimes about people they encountered who were, whether they were real or not, were into this kind of stuff with Satanism or whatever else, or more Hollywood style Satanism. But it was interesting to me to cast someone in that because they said they had some run-ins with some people that would disagree with them or were purportedly practicing black magic. And I thought, this is interesting.
And they literally did take totems out of the woods.
They did. They found them.
Yeah, and they would remove them and put them in their museum under their watch. Like,
sure,
that is a true element to the work that they did.
It was, and I wanted more. I know we get the backstory, close to with 15 minutes to go, really, in the film.
Yeah,
but I had to think like, did I miss something? Did they go into a further explanation of who this woman is, and most importantly, why is she cursing? Did I miss something? Did they ever explain why she cursed them?
The boy, or I mean, I
Arnie?
could see why they would curse Lorraine.
Oh, that makes sense.
But I don't know. No, because I asked myself that question. Either that or we both missed it.
I don't think we.
But
I don't think you.
But I was wondering, the same thing.
Right, like why? What was the grudge? Why did she target this kid?
Right.
It was those elements were left were lacking. And I know that we there's this week on Tuesday, DC just released a Conjuring tie-in, which is sort of like a prequel to the film called The Lover, and it has the woman on the front cover by Bill Sienkiewicz, which is a great cover.
Yeah.
I haven't read the comic yet, but what I would like to say, like, oh well, they want people to go and find the comic, like really the people who are going to see Conjuring or watching it on television are probably not the target audience for the comic. They might get someone to wander in a local comic shop to check it out, and again, you could read the story about it on Conskipper. But it's whether they're going to tell the backstory of this woman or the Danvers case, which they didn't really get. They got into not the origins of it. We don't know how she got the totem when she was at Fairfield University.
Right. They just said Fairfield.
Yes, you're right. They did not. They did not say. They didn't
so
go
it
further
could have
than
been
that.
Sacred Heart.
It could have been Sacred Heart. It could have been.
I think those are the two choices.
Those are the two choices we have.
Now, the other thing about The Devil in Connecticut is I think the scariest anecdote of that whole story is that Arnie Johnson claims that he was possessed. Like when he gets fully possessed, he goes down into the well. Right, which they thought that this well was like where this evil stuff was coming from.
Sure.
And he comes face to face with the demon and looks into its eyes, and that's the moment that he gets possessed.
Right.
That story is 100% like you want to talk about a great movie scare.
Yes.
In a Conjuring film, right? Like having this kid.
Yep.
Go down the well, digging around down there. There's, I don't know.
Stank. It's wet.
You got your rats in there,
sure.
Maybe some dead things.
Right.
And then all of a sudden, like looking into the eyes of a demon in the pitch darkness of the well. I mean,
that writes itself.
Are you kidding me?
Yeah, that was a missed opportunity. And claustrophobic as well.
Yeah.
And I think, you said it at the start of this or close to the beginning that you're not sure if this film is for the high school kids who are going to go see it and have a good time in the theater, on a Friday or Saturday night, or people who know the legacy of the Warrens, or people who watch all the Travel Channel shows about ghosts and, all that kind of a thing. And this is a way where I think sometimes Hollywood doesn't give audiences enough credit.
Right.
Because like he did in the first film, as we've talked about before, one of the best scares in the movie has absolutely nothing happening in it. When the girls in the
that's
house,
Joey King, right?
Right. It is her. Yes, it is.
And she's just like, there's someone in the corner of the door.
Right.
Yep.
And there's no special effects. It's just Juan filming that girl's reaction and
looking at a dark shadow and being scared.
That's it. And that scared people. I can remember it being in the theater when we saw it, and people were ready to climb the walls of the place.
Right.
And I think that's where that Hollywood, with these type of films, people are going to go see it anyways. Why not actually scare them?
And in this movie, if they did that scene, whatever was there would come running out at the charger. Yeah, charging out. How many times did that happen?
At least 4.
Pitch black shadow, and then something comes running out really quickly.
Speed is not the element that you need in a film like this.
And that's, my concern is I think that this film is going to generate a lukewarm reaction.
Right.
I think they might have even kind of known it, given when it was released and everything. And I'm afraid the studio is going to get the wrong idea from this. And then what they're going to say is, audiences didn't like it. We need more crooked men. We need more nuns. We need more clowns. And I hope that's not the lesson that they get from it. Because, again, I'm hoping if they do another Conjuring film or if they want to make a series spinoff, I'll watch a show just Ed Lorraine just kind of you could take the ghosts out of it.
Sure.
They're such engaging characters.
Right.
I'm happy to watch Ed and Lorraine do their taxes. Ed and Lorraine go to the local
Go
swimming
shopping.
pool. Yeah.
Yeah, why not? I mean, it's they are engaging. They were engaging in life, and they're engaging on film. And Wilson and Farmiga, they're good together. Like you said,
Absolutely.
they've worked together for so long. They know those characters. They have the timing. They have all that stuff down. And I think some of those mundane moments would even humanize them more on screen. It's clear they love each other in these films. They because they've developed it, because both of them are fine actors. But and you know what, I think the scariest part for me of the film, and I think for a lot of people, I imagine if you ask them, the very end, as they followed suit, they play actual,
Yes.
with ominous, creepy music.
Yeah. That was the scariest part of the movie. The end credits.
Yes.
Right.
That's when I wanted to turn the light on.
Yep. Yep. The tape. There's the audio tape.
Right.
And some pictures.
That's it.
And some scary music.
Right.
Was more effective than the previous 2 hours.
It really was. And what does it last for? Maybe a minute.
Yeah. It was the most engaging moment of the whole film, though.
It was. And that's where I think that, like you said, I could absolutely see them say, we need more gonzo kind of, wild scenes, more monsters, more nuns, more crooked men, all of them, right? More werewolves.
More nude zombies.
More zombies. And throw them in, like, it'll be a monster mash.
Right.
We don't need that. We need a atmospheric, slow burn type of story, which the endings of these films, they give it to you, but they only give you a tiny, tiny bite of it.
And throw in all the bureaucracy that came with their job.
Right.
Of dealing with the church,
Yep.
dealing with the families, dealing with the press, the public, skeptics. It was all a part of their lives.
Yes.
So, bring that stuff into there.
Yes, and Ed Warren was famous for arguing with people. You get a little of that in the second one when they're on the talk show and he's defending Amityville and what happened there. And I figured, well, this one, he's going to be in court. Yeah. This is really good. And it's going to give Wilson a chance to amp that up a little bit and play that, fighting against the, like you said, the bureaucracy, the government, the perception of the supernatural, which they, of course, in this film universe is real, but not everyone, of course, most people don't believe in it. I think giving them an opportunity, again, they probably won't get it, unfortunately, but to do a case like that, to do a Lindley Street, and go through the whole piece, the whole story. That story itself, with a little Hollywood elements, with a few, could be extremely engaging.
Right. You don't need anything else.
You don't.
So I think that it's based on what we've said today, it's pretty clear, I think, where we're heading with this. But, part of these Conskipper podcasts, we have to, as, the skippers here, we got to help our audience determine whether they ought to get a ticket for this film or skip it.
Yep.
So Skipper Nick, what do you think? Ticket or skip it for The Conjuring? The Devil Made Me Do It.
Well, I'm gonna take a little bit of a note from the last one we did about Mortal Kombat, and I'm gonna say that I would not buy a ticket to this movie. But if you have HBO Max, if it's part of your cable bill, and you are a big fan of The Conjuring, the previous films, you might want to see it. If it was me, I would skip it.
I'm going to say skip it and watch The Conjuring Part 1.
Original.
That's my advice. Go back. You want to see what made this a great franchise. You want to see why Ed and Lorraine are such an interesting couple.
Right.
You want to see why these cases are so interesting, why they've endured the test of time. Go back and watch the first one. I don't think you're missing anything from this one.
There's nothing you haven't seen before.
Right.
And you've seen it done better. And I would recommend too that for people that are unfamiliar with all of the books that have been written, which I think are now starting to come back into publication because of the success of these films.
Yes, the Devil in Connecticut was just reprinted with a Conjuring cover.
Oh, okay, so that's perfect. The Demonologist, that was a book that kept me up at night. The original,
Yeah.
you know, and there's all this great body of work out there.
And of course, there's Seekers of the Supernatural.
Oh.
If it's very difficult to find these days.
They're tough. They're tough, but those are great public access shows. When you hear public access, it's like, oh, come on. But they are very engaging, and the stories are great, and you also get to see their personalities displayed on those shows.
There's just so much great content out there.
Yep.
So that's why I say skip it, because there's so much else that you could invest your time in and have a much more satisfying experience.
I would agree.
Well, then that does it for our review of The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It. And Skipper Nick, when do you think we're going to be back with another review?
Well, that is a good question. You know, if we're looking at if we're going the HBO Max route, there is a Suicide Squad film coming soon.
Yes, and also in theaters and on Disney Plus, we're going to have The Jungle Cruise
and Black Widow.
Black Widow, yep. So
we're going to have some coming up. It's starting, as with everything right now, we're starting to get back to some normalcy, and the movies are going to start coming at a much quicker clip than we've experienced in the last year and a half.
And hopefully we'll have some convention information coming up soon. Maybe we'll be reviewing some shows.
Yes, indeed.
In the near future as shows start to open up. So
yep.
It'll be time to put the con back in Conskipper.
That's correct. And yes, for anyone else, you know, as far as we're getting back to that scene as well. And in order to stay up on it, please check out the website. Any news, announcements, shows, comics, films, it's all there for you. It's right at your fingertips.
So thank you for listening, and good luck out there. Keep skipping.